Good morning, great people. You know what time it is, right? It's time for conversations on the Unboxed Morning Show. And I started off the same way every time, right? So by now, you can kind of say it with me. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. This not your day, this the Lord day. So be glad in this day. Started off absolutely awesome and amazing because you are awesome and amazing. And, I tell you guys all the time, I have great conversations because I talk to great people. And so, I mean, why not just continue that with today? So, let me talk a little bit about our guest today. Now, I always start with the story too, because I don't really meet strangers. I meet people intentionally and on purpose for purpose. So, having been at the Mary Parker Foundation for Black History Month, she had a panel. Excuse me. Excuse me. And this gentleman, excuse me, just happened to be on that panel that day and came with some, oh gosh, y'all, came with some insightful information. So let me tell you, we already know how things go. So my little cough was not a cough before we had this call, y'all. And so this must be a powerful conversation. I look at everything and I just look at the way things go. So I'm going to talk to you today, or I'm bringing on to our platform to have conversation with Thomas McLaurin, right? McLaurin. And
That's correct.
right, McLaurin, right?
That's correct.
All righty. So Mr. Thomas is originally from North Carolina, and he graduated from East Carolina and North Carolina Central University. Following his parents' footsteps, Thomas moved to Georgia after graduating and served as a teacher and a coach for 31 years in the Georgia public school system. After retirement, he served as executive director for the Floyd Family Center for Social Equality, a family nonprofit organization founded in memory of his late cousin, George Floyd. Now, Thomas is married to Reverend Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin, a seminary professor at the Methodist Theology School of Ohio. And together they have a blended family of 5 children and 2 grandchildren. He's a musician, works in television, movie industry, and background, and a stand-in actor. He does voiceover work and enjoys playing golf and other outdoor activities. Sounds like a well-rounded man to me. Good morning, Mr. Thomas.
Good morning. And I'm like, who's that guy she's talking about? That's good morning.
Right?
It is so good to talk to you today, Renee.
It
Yes.
really is. When I met you that morning, yeah, that afternoon, and just kind of listened to some of the things that you were saying, I was like, okay, I have to have you on the show. I am so
Mhm.
grateful that God has given me a platform and a highway to be able to bring people like yourself here to be able to really give what we need as a people. It's just amazing that this platform, as far as like radio, media, and entertainment, a lot of times we are pushed a narrative that is not empowerful, it's not impacting, it's not uplifting. And so given the opportunity to put people on the platform such as yourself to change some narratives or bring the positivity and some fresh air to breathe through our airways is always a pleasure.
That's awesome. And I certainly appreciate you for having a platform and for having a voice because we know that our voice is trying to be snuffed out.
Hmm.
And because God has given you a mandate to go forth and make sure that positive voices are heard, I'm grateful. And I know that your listeners are also grateful to that. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And Thomas, I'm really funny. I'm like, listen, God gave me this mouth. I've been running it forever. And then he had a nerve to give me the platform to use it. I said, well, listen here, God, you got a sense of humor.
Uh,
Oh my goodness.
oh, yes,
So,
yes, yes.
so I,
Awesome.
I do know that, I think we said this that day that you were on the platform that although we're given a month to celebrate our melon, we celebrate every day.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
Black History 24/7, 365.
24/7. I have
Mhm.
melon from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. So, and I am worth celebrating because my daddy said I'm joint heir. So I get to
Mhm.
celebrate all the time,
That's
right?
right. That's right. What did Jesse Jackson say? I am somebody. You are somebody.
Oh my gosh. You know what? You know what, Thomas? It's funny that you said that because one of the things as we talk about Black history, being Black, and I'm gonna point something out and kind of let you dwell on it a little bit.
Okay.
In our community, right? Um, and go with me here for a minute. We have been kind of suppressed to be able to celebrate ourselves, to believe that we are somebody.
Hmm.
And going into the history, I read somewhere, and I don't remember exactly where, but it was very interesting when I was looking at some history behind that. As one who provides psychological and therapeutic services, I always wonder where the origin of a thing is. And so when I looked at why is it that we in our community don't celebrate ourselves or not so fast to talk about our accomplishments or what we're doing and why is it so suppressed, and it took me back, my rabbit hole took me to some research in the plantation, and that
Mm,
especially Black males,
right.
they were not celebrated because the more they were seen as a prize, the more they were worth to the owner, not to the
Right.
family.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about that a little bit because I also speak about inherited trauma from the very same things, right? Either not
Hmm.
knowing our history or but because of our history, we're already born into a certain thing. So just talk about that. That I am somebody. Why do you think that we haven't really picked that up and carried that torch really, really heavy in this climate?
Ooh, there's so many layers of that to uncover. I mean, think about an onion. When you start to peel it, it just keeps going and going until
Mm,
you get to the root. And, of course, our roots begin across the ocean. And I tell young people all the time, we did not come over here as slaves.
mm-hmm,
We came over here as kings and queens, and a group of people made us into slaves. They put
mm-hmm,
us into shackles and made us slaves, and so that was just a temporary state that we were in, but it was a state that really um, took us back a long time. It's
mm-hmm,
almost like running in a track meet. Okay, you're going to run a 100-meter dash, but you have to start 25 to 50 meters behind everybody else.
mm-hmm.
And you are expected to catch up with them and even beat them before they
Ooh,
get to the other end.
yeah.
And so there's so much to uncover with that. But I say that I am somebody because of my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My ancestors were the ones that survived the Middle Passage. They were the ones that
Wow.
survived that voyage that took 6 to 8 months sometimes to come over,
Mhm, mhm,
chained to each other, down in the bottom of a ship, not knowing where you're going, not knowing when you're going to get there,
mm,
not knowing if you're going to survive, but they did survive. And because they survived, I am here. So that means God has a purpose for me. And
absolutely.
because God has a purpose, I am somebody.
You know, Thomas, with that, I am well into some nice years of life, and I'm from
Mhm.
Baltimore, Maryland, where the population is, more Black than anything, Baltimore City.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sadly enough, because I want to touch on this a little bit, sadly enough, I always knew, of course, I was Black. I mean, I looked in the mirror, I saw, but I never really understood how powerful and how to celebrate that and or
Mhm.
the history that you're talking about because it wasn't given to me in public school. And I'm
Right.
going to tell you, it wasn't until I was, and I say this, I took African American studies in college. And when I went to college, I was older, right? I was already a mom and married and all that stuff. But um they one of the course the one of the trips that I had to take was to Baltimore Black Wax Museum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I think we
Mm.
are one of the only one or something. I know it has some kind of prevalence that, our Black Wax Museum. But I was
Hmm.
forced to go because to get a grade in my course, right?
Right.
And
Uh-huh.
so that very ship that you spoke of was replicated in the Black Wax Museum. Now, I never really heard that in any of my textbooks for Black History Month or things of that nature. But to go to that place and to see that ship and the, like I said, the replication and the reenactment or whatever, honestly, I had to be in my mid 20s, late 20s. I broke down in
Yes.
that museum because I put
Mm.
myself in that place. Just as what you said, not knowing where I was going to go, if I would be separated from my family, where my family was, what was going to be expected or required. And I broke down. But Thomas, I'm going to tell you where I really lost it.
Mm.
In that museum was uh, the wax or the figure of a white male giving the implication of raping one of the women. And when I
Oh.
tell you, I could not get myself together. I
Mm.
couldn't get myself together because, you know, like you said, the whole not knowing and what's going on now, not only are you seen as less than human and property, but now that property is being taken advantage of and damaged. It really blew me away. And what I wanted to say to that was, what do you think we should do kind of right now, um, to give more of not only the positive history, but the real raw history beyond just the television and things of that nature? So we could know more of our whole history and to have it and not be so much angered by it, but empowered by it to do better and be better. I'm giving you onions. I know I'm giving you onions to.
Yes, there was a person, I'm trying to remember who wrote this book.
Mhm.
I think it might have been a minister by the name of Kwanzaa Kunjufu.
I do
That
recall that name. Hmm.
he may not be the author. However, but there was a book that was called "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway."
Mm.
Okay, so in other words, sometimes it's like public speaking. People say public speaking is like the number one fear people have.
Mhm.
You know, other people have fear of heights, other people have fear of the dark, various things like that. I think we overall as a people have a fear of our past.
Ooh, that's
And
really
so we need to feel the fear, but do it anyway. We need to talk about it. We need to teach our children. We need to bring it up. We don't need to be afraid that the boogeyman is going to get us if we talk about our ancestors, if we talk about slavery, if we talk about the people who were raped or beaten or whatever. That is something that has taken place.
Mhm.
And you know, one thing you can't do is you can't go back and change history. The
Right.
only thing you can do is learn from it
Right.
and hopefully make the necessary changes so that it does not repeat itself. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, you know, each and every day we make history. You know, I used to tell my students when I was teaching, I said, you know, you're 5 minutes older now than you were 5 minutes ago.
How about that?
So,
Absolutely.
so what have you done in the past 5 minutes to make a positive impact, to make
Mhm.
a difference in your own life, much less the lives of those around us? So,
Absolutely.
one of the things we need to do is we need to, you know, listen to our elders. We need to listen to those who have the stories of their past. I'm old enough to remember going to the movie theater and we had to sit in the balcony.
Mhm.
I'm old enough to remember going with my dad to the local bus station to pick up a relative who was traveling in from New York. And when we walked into the bus station, we had to go in the little room that said colored waiting room. You
Mm.
know, um, uh, I didn't go to school with white kids until I was in the sixth grade. So I remember, you know, going to an all black school and living in an all black neighborhood. Where I came from, it's still pretty much like that. Well, not the school, but the neighborhood,
Mhm.
all black. And then when you cross over the railroad tracks, it's all white.
Right.
So we have to not be afraid to talk about those things. You know, we often hear people say, "Well, well, some people say, well, slavery is in the past, civil rights is in the past, the movement, the marches and all that, that's in the past. Just forget about it and move on. No one tells the Jewish community to forget about the Holocaust.
Absolutely. But
You
I
know,
want to say something to that, though, Thomas, because
go
it's
ahead.
funny that you're saying this because for the Jewish community, right? And just scripturally speaking, they know it says, write the tablet upon your chest that you don't forget these things, right? So they
Exactly.
pass it down as an empowerment. But because ours is given to us or fed to us in such negativity, I think that the way it's given as well, because we're not receiving it in a healthy emotional state. And I'm going to be honest with you, so many people receive the history and they become angered and they don't understand or know what to do with that anger to actually use it to fuel them for something positive. But it's kind of goes to the whole negative thing because that's what's constantly given, the negative aspect. So we're not getting the history like you talked about the kings and the queens and the ancestors who were empowerment and given more of what we did and for social justice and for movements and things of that nature. It's talked about, we were enslaved and we were captured and we had cotton fields and things of that nature. And I kind of seem to see that kind of emotionally wears some of us, more so empower us to look at the positive and build on that.
Can I ask you this then?
Mm-hmm.
Who's telling the story?
Oh, now see, that's a whole other thing as well. And that's
Hmm.
going back to the whole like the system of the way with the school and the teaching. Now we should be giving it
There
to
you
us
go.
in our homes. However, like you said,
Hmm.
the systems that have controlled the narrative is giving this, and that's
There
why
you
we're
go.
picking it up and not feasting on it for empowerment, but we're actually starving ourselves in malnutrition with what we're getting.
Exactly, exactly. You know, I taught African American history in high school for a couple of years before they said we're not going to do it anymore. I think I had 3 years to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
And when the assistant principal at my school came to me and asked if I would be willing to teach the course, I said, of course. I said, however, I have one stipulation. And she said, well, what's that? I said, can I do it my way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my way was to tell the
Mm-hmm.
truth about what happened. But at the same time, as I'm telling the truth, talk about the endurance, talk about the ones that made it through, talk about the ones that survived.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is disheartening. It is um, hard to hear that you were chained to a tree and then beaten with a whip within an inch of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you familiar with the Willie Lynch letter?
And I am.
And now, there are some people
But wait,
that
Thomas,
say,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I am, you are, but can you
Right.
just share with the listening audience? Because like you said, we're teaching and empowering. So can
Mhm.
you share a little bit about the Willie Lynch? Oh, do I know it? That's why one of the reasons why I empower the black man to this day. But go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. Well, this guy Willie Lynch. Now,
Hmm.
supposedly, this is where the lynching name came
Hmm.
from his last name. When they say they lynch people, um, and there have been statements or writings or whatever that this was not real, that it was
Yeah,
something that was made up.
yeah,
I have a tendency to believe it was real. Willie Lynch
absolutely.
was a slave owner who had slaves down in the Caribbean,
Hmm.
and he was summoned by slave owners up in the colonies, in particular Virginia, because they were having trouble with their slaves, misbehaving, running off, not doing what they're supposed to do. So they said, well, you run such a successful plantation down there. Can you come and help us?
Mm,
And so the Willie Lynch letter, you can just Google it
yes.
and read it. It basically was him coming to Jamestown or to the Virginia area on the James River and talking to these slave owners and telling them this is what you need to do to tame your slaves. And
Hmm.
there's one little part. As a matter of fact, I have it up on my computer in front of me now. I just want to read this one little part here.
Hmm.
He says, gentlemen, You know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I'm not here to enumerate your problems. I'm here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In
Mm-hmm.
my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that, if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years.
Mm.
My method is simple, and any member of your family or your overseer can use it. Now, supposedly, this letter was written in 1712.
Mm.
He said, if you do what I tell you to do, you will control your slaves for at
Mm.
least 300 years. What's 300 years after 1712? That's 2012.
Mm.
That's what, 14 years ago.
My
I
God.
believe that some of the things that this man did or said that brainwashed a lot of slaves back then, because the methods of controlling,
Mm.
you want to control the mind. Uh, um, I did a little, I don't know if you remember my spoken word that
I
I
remember
did
some
when
of
I
it,
was there. Yeah.
but I would love for you to
And
share it with us because everybody wasn't there.
yeah, one of my favorite music artists, believe it or not, is George Clinton.
Okay.
I'm a musician. You mentioned that in my introduction, and I just, I like great musicianship.
Yes.
And one of the things George Clinton said was, "Free your mind, and
Mm.
your behind will follow."
And then look, and In Vogue came after that. Free
Yeah,
your mind,
there you
and the
go.
rest will
Yes, we'll
follow.
follow. There you go. There you
Yes.
go. And so when you control the mind, you control a lot of things. And there was a lot of mind control that took place. And I think it has perpetuated itself for the 300 plus years since this was written, you know.
Absolutely. And
So,
there was, so in that letter, because reading a little further, it got a little graphic. And I
oh,
remember
yeah.
it to say something about tying the black man's legs to
Yes.
horses.
Yeah,
And
I was
then,
going to say that.
oh my goodness, that I couldn't even visualize. But
Yeah.
going back to what you're saying about the controlling of the mind, and like you said, for 300 years, a lot of times we don't realize, or we're not looking at or being aware at the fact that we are being controlled by what we spoke about a little
Hmm.
area earlier, the media, our
Hmm.
music, our watchmanship through television and movies. And it's like that is that control where you're like, even to the
Yeah.
point where someone's going, I'm not being beaten anymore. Well, no, beaten may not be, of course, your physical nature, but your
Hmm.
mind is being
Hmm.
distorted, even down to the place where people have become desensitized to human emotion and love and empathy and things of that nature. That's a part of that beating you.
Yeah, I have to say this. I'm not going to get graphic, but I
Hmm.
want to go to that part that you mentioned
Hmm.
about tying the slave to the horses.
Hmm.
What Willie Lynch said was, get the biggest, blackest,
Yes.
baddest slave on
Yep.
your plantation,
Yep.
and make sure that everybody is there to watch them, especially the mothers of the
Yes.
boys. Because when they see what I'm
Mm.
going to do to this biggest, baddest, blackest one that you have, then the mother is going to tell her son, don't you be like that, because this is what's going to happen to you.
Ooh, so
So in
wait,
other
Thomas,
words,
because you're saying some real powerful stuff.
yeah.
I want to tie this in here. So what you said, because I want to make it plain. We
Hmm.
talking about the Willie Lynch, and you just gave that ideology or that understanding of what that's what the system came in
That's right.
and showed us from the welfare perspective. Though he didn't beat them, they put that man in a position to be made as the example and put him in front of us as melanated women and women of or parents of sons to go,
Hmm.
dare not stand up in your authority because something's going to happen to you. Okay,
Something's
I
going
just
to
wanted
happen.
to go ahead. Hmm.
No, that's exactly where I was going with that. You always hear people talk about, well, he's a mama's boy. He's a
Hmm.
mama's boy. I was a mama's boy,
Hmm.
but I was also my daddy's son.
Right.
And my daddy taught me a lot about standing up for myself. It
Hmm.
taught me a lot about being who I was meant to be, and not kowtow to anybody or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, unfortunately, in our community, a lot of that does not happen. Now, that's not to say that because there may not be a father in the household that the mother can't do what she needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know plenty of single mothers that have raised great young men to be great young men, to be who
Absolutely.
they're supposed to be. But we definitely have seen throughout our history that there have been so many times when black men won't stand up and be the man they're supposed to be simply because they are afraid of what the system is going to do to them, and the mother may
Absolutely.
be afraid of what the system is going to do to them. And so you have to be bold, you have to stand up, and you have to know exactly who it is that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And we as older people, it's funny that I start considering myself in the older generation. I do have my AARP card, so
How about
and I
that?
and, and I am retired, so I guess I'm here. We've got to reach back and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that our young people understand. Going back to our original theme, you are somebody. You're not
Absolutely.
here by accident. You have a place in this society. Stand up and take your rightful place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that being said, I do want to transition over a little bit because we definitely have to talk about, of course, you are the executive director for the Floyd Family Center for Social Equality. And in this climate, as we transition from talking about what we're doing or what is being done to our melanated men, right?
Mhm.
Because and we can say so much about this when it comes to several, like we talked about earlier, layers. Kind of going with what we were talking about with removing or damaging that man in front of the family. Um, we have to do they're do it's being done more and more to annihilate greater because one, I believe, because of the seed that you carry, right?
Mhm.
Because your
Yes.
seed produces even more power. But the more we
Yes.
lose in our social climate, the empowerment to who that person is, with all kinds of examples. I really want to delve into that. So what does it look like? And of course, my much condolences because I hurt that some of us have to be the example, but it's also the empowerment to make movements in our
Yes.
social justice. So talk to me a little bit about that. Run me through, of course, what's being taken place. I know that I did a little background and a little some research and understanding that there was a bill that was in the House of Representatives, right? Was there a George Floyd bill that was
Yes.
out to make a change? Let's talk about that a little bit, Thomas.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, as you mentioned, I am a direct relative of George Floyd. His father and my mother were siblings.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people only associate George with Houston, Texas, where he grew up, and then, of course, Minneapolis, where he was murdered. But he was born in North Carolina. Both of his parents, like I said, my uncle and his mother, are originally from the great state of North Carolina. He was born in Fayetteville, and my uncle and his wife, they had three kids. They had two girls and then George.
Mm-hmm.
When he was about 4 years old, and I'm the oldest cousin, so I was about to go off to college when he was much younger.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the last time I actually saw him, he was around 4 years old. His mother and my uncle divorced,
Mm-hmm.
and she packed up the kids and moved to Houston, Texas. She had a sister that lived out there, and so she wanted to relocate and kind of restart her life. And when George was right before he was killed, as a matter of fact, in 2017, there was a birthday party with one of my cousins who lives in New York. My
Mm-hmm.
sister and some other relatives from North Carolina actually went to that birthday party, and George was there.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually told my sister and some others, he said, I hate that I've been gone so long. I really need to reconnect with my North Carolina roots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, he had, gotten into a few issues while in Texas. So he moved to Minneapolis, where he had another aunt, another one of his mother's sisters lived there to kind of, get a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on track of getting a fresh start. He was doing a lot of community work, going to church, uh, being a mentor to some younger people. And then, of course, we know what happened on May 25th, 2020.
Yes.
So we started a foundation, and we call it the Floyd Family Center for Social Equity, basically to keep that name alive. Because we know
That's
we
important.
see so many incidences that happen in our community, and of course, people will be in have an outrage or uproar or whatever for a short time, and then it's forgotten, and then something else happens, and something
Right.
else happens. I can just go back to Trayvon Martin, from Trayvon Martin through to George. So many things have happened to our people because of unjust police officers or vigilantes or whatever the case may be, and then it's forgotten. And
Yes.
so after George's murder, there was a bill that was introduced called the George Floyd Policing Bill. And primarily it was to make sure that there would be some changes going on in the police force. And it
Mm-hmm.
did make it through the House of Representatives, but then it sort of died when it went over to the Senate. So we are, still trying to talk to people who can make a difference to get that reintroduced. Um, the other thing that one of my uncles who lives in North Carolina, what we are trying to do is make sure that underserved communities have a voice. We
Yes.
we
Yes.
found out that by mentioning that we are relatives of George Floyd, it does open some doors,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets people to listen. And we have made some contacts with several people around the country who are influencers, who are influential. As a matter of fact, as we speak, we are working on a documentary, uh, still in the very beginning stage. We have the outline written and everything. We have a producer that we've hired. We are seeking funding now to try to get this thing produced and out there. But the documentary is not focusing on what happened to George. Everybody knows that story. All you have to do
Right.
is go online, you can see the video. But what we're focusing on is the healing. How do we heal?
Mm.
And not just from what happened to George, but from what happened to so many. People tend to forget in the very same year that George was murdered, Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery were killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many other things. And I think there's been, over 1,700 deaths uh, by, police or, like I said, vigilantes or whatever since George. There's been over 1,700. So nothing is really changing, and is only going to change until people step up and try to make change. And that's what we're looking to do. And
And
so,
that's great.
yeah,
That
yeah,
yeah, that part because what you said, I'm the person that to every problem there's a solution. So we know that
yes,
there's problems. Let's start being more vocal and more visible with the
yes.
solution. So I really appreciate that. And if you've got the treatment and all that stuff together, we may have to have some other talks because might have some avenues for you for distribution and yeah, so let's talk about
Oh,
that.
yeah,
That's an
most definitely.
offline conversation, but this is
Yeah.
not our only conversation.
No, most
Um,
definitely.
but and like you said, the healing aspect. And so, I did read in the bio, of course, your attachment as a teacher and a coach in the public school. So I want to say this because with the youth empowerment, with bringing that next generation on and up to par with the healing aspect. Let me ask you, do you think that schools are helping or limiting youth empowerment?
I think there's a lot of good that is going on in the schools because you
Hmm.
do have some good teachers.
Hmm.
But the thing that we cannot totally depend upon is for the school system to raise our kids, to
Absolutely.
train our kids to go in the right direction, to do what they need to do. Because as I was winding down my career, um, and I actually stopped coaching 5 years before I retired.
Hmm.
But as I
Hmm.
was winding down my career, I was noticing that teachers weren't teaching anymore.
Yeah.
They were basically just facilitating.
And I have said that honestly because I still have a young one navigating this last one
Yeah,
navigating through the school system. And I say
yeah,
this all the time. I said it really saddens and disheartens me the fact that we no longer have educators, we have teachers. right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
yeah,
definitely a difference. And I understand, honestly, in this climate as well, we of course lost great educators due to age, of course, due to system changes and things of that
mhm,
nature. But this climate really does take for an individual to have a passion for pouring in. Empowering and uplifting these young
yeah,
ones because they're coming into the building, of course, needing more than a teacher because they're
yes,
getting taught a lot of things from a lot of places. They need educators and nurturers and
yes,
empowerers in those buildings in this hour.
yes,
And we're losing that. And I understand that, which also kind of to a degree loses the voice for that youth. Because, they're, and it's sad, Thomas. And again, I am that parent for this. And this is why I know it personally when you have a youth that is empowerful, I mean, impactful and doing positive things, either they slip through the cracks or they
yes,
start seeing that so many of their peers with negative behaviors is getting the attention. They kind of
yes,
start falling into it. And so
yes,
I think it's having them to lose their voice. And so,
yes.
one of the things that we can do, as like you said, not just in the school, by the time they get to the building, we have to create a household and a community that by the time they get to the building, if they're met with something that is in opposition to what they're being given at home and in the community, they have enough strength to still have that voice to speak.
That is so true. That is so true. I've always said that teaching is not a job.
Mm-mm.
It is a calling.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
a calling. I've seen so many people while I was teaching that left corporate America and said, you know what, I just couldn't deal with going and sitting at a desk all the time. So I said, let me just go into teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And they would get there and they wouldn't last a year,
Not at all.
because they didn't understand what it was about. It's not about just teaching or coming in and conveying information. It's about helping to transform. You know, I used to do something when I was teaching history.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do something on the first day of school. I would have my kids come in. I said, all right, I'd go over my little simple classroom rules, which I only had one class rule that was respect.
Oh, that's big.
And,
Listen, that's if you have that, everything
yeah,
else follows.
it falls underneath that. And so, yeah, so that was my one rule. But I would tell them shortly after that, I said, okay, we're going to take a quiz. So don't worry about it. You don't have to write anything down. I'm just going to call out some questions and I want you to answer. And so I would, ask, what happened on December 7th, 1941?
Mhm.
There might be one or two that understood or remembered that that was when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would say something like, what happened on July 20th, 1969? Of course, that's when Neil Armstrong took the first steps on the moon. And I would do things like that. And I would say, okay, and I may ask 10, 12 questions. I said, all right, now, how many of you are going to get a job where you're going to need to learn, where you're going to need to know all that information?
Mhm. Mhm.
And they would be like, well, if I'm going to be a teacher, I said, no, you don't even have to know it if you're going to be a teacher. It's right there in the book. You don't even have to remember it or whatever. I said, maybe if you go on Jeopardy, it might help you. I said, but you're not really going to use any of that information. So what is the whole thing of being here and learning all this stuff? I said, you need to learn how to learn.
Ooh, I like that. Wait, you
Yeah.
need to learn how to learn. Now,
Yes.
that
Because if
right
you,
there. Mhm.
yeah, because if you graduate with a degree and you go into a job, 9 times out of 10, the stuff that you learn while you're in school, it won't even pertain to that job. Some of it might, especially if
Mhm.
you're dealing with something with math or sciences, but
Mhm.
for the most part, you're going to learn what you need to learn about that job on the job.
Yeah,
And if you are a fast learner, then the quicker you can get to the place to where you can move up the ladder and be promoted and then teach other
absolutely.
people what they need to know. Nobody wants to go into a job and stay at the bottom of the rung.
Absolutely.
So we
And
need people who understand how to reach young people.
yeah, ooh, absolutely.
Not all kids learn the same.
It
You
wa
know,
it's funny because I was gonna ask you, how do you think the culture shapes what empowerment looks like for our youth?
uh, Well, if I'm honest, well, I don't know. It's probably a little bit different now, but if I'm honest, a few years ago, the culture told our youth, be a rapper or be a
Mm-hmm.
ball player,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that was what was getting all the attention. Just like you said earlier about some of the negative behavior getting the attention, you know. And if you remember in my little spoken word piece, I said we can do much more than slam dunk a basketball or score a touchdown.
Absolutely.
We can put a man in outer space.
Mm-hmm.
Katherine Johnson. How many people would have known about Katherine Johnson if it hadn't been for the great movie, The
The
Hidden Figures.
yes, yes, yes,
You know,
absolutely, absolutely. And
so
so that, and you're right, like you said, and of course the visibility, being able to
mhm,
have the visibility and the lanes, to, like I said, change the trajectory of what we are seeing and what we're getting
yes,
and who's giving the story, who's narrating our story for us. You know what I
that's
mean?
it.
Um,
Amen.
so just this one last question I wanted to kind of, talk about a little bit before I want people to know where to find you and how they can support you. As we were talking about this, what do you think that like how do you think youth can influence our government and our policy decisions? Because they do have, like you said, we're talking about their empowerment, we're talking about giving them a voice. How can they actually impact or influence our government or policy decisions about them?
Well, first and foremost, and of course you have to be 18,
Mm-hmm.
they need to register and make sure that they vote for people that support their ideas.
Gotcha.
But even before then, believe it or not, where you spend your dollars
Mm-hmm.
makes a big difference. Even though that's something that's we call financial, we also know that financial influences political.
Thomas, can you say that again? We have got to empower our youth. Listen, if you don't
Yeah.
like that store that's being ran by a different ethnicity group, if you're not being treated well, you don't have to go in
You
there. But
don't have to go there. You don't have to go there. And if they recognize that they are, I mean, look at the big Target
hmm
boycott.
hmm
You know, if you don't spend money there, then those big corporations who fund a lot of our political operations, those big corporations will say, "Hey, you need to change what's going on because we're losing our bottom line."
hmm hmm
You want to hurt some people, hurt them in the pocket,
Hurt them in the pocket.
and that will
Absolutely.
definitely help make some changes.
Ec-
So, but
Economic
see,
ruins will bring a
yeah,
lot of things down.
there you
Absolutely.
go. But our kids have to be educated. They have to be taught that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and we cannot have them rely on getting all their information from social media.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And I think
And-
one of that empowerment to change policies, going back to the money aspect as well, is if we also incorporate teaching our young people how to be entrepreneurs, right? Because
amen.
when they start creating on their own, using the gifts and talents that would make room for them, right? The natural gifts and talents that they're doing, and then teaching them some of the things that are taught in other cultures that we don't really stand on that much either, teaching them the art of bartering. I
Yes,
think those are other things that would help them change that, like you said, until they're maybe 18, we can, do more in the community to help this individual go, hey, listen, you like to work with your hands. I know you're only 9, but guess what? Let's show you how those transferable skills can bring income where you don't have to depend on the system. So, then they don't have to now have you a puppet on a string, having you to do things because you already know how to quote unquote survive and make do with what God has already given you.
amen. Well
Yeah.
said. Well said.
No, this was good conversation. I knew that we were going to have an amazing time, and I looked forward to this, and I'm so glad we got the opportunity to do this as well. Like, I'm really honored to have you on the platform and for people to hear, again, like I said, the insight and the information and the perspective that you had. I thought it was well worth people just beyond myself to get that information. As well as I never leave this any conversation without allowing individuals to let people know how can they find you, how can they support you.
Well, a couple of ways you can find me.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, I am on Facebook, Thomas McLaurin. on Facebook. But as far as our foundation is
Yes.
concerned, we have a website, which is www.floydfamilycenter.org.
Mm,
floydfamilycenter.org. My email, tmclaurin57 at gmail.com, or they can reach me through the website, through the my site email, Thomas at floydfamilycenter.org. And ironically, my uncle and I have just hired a person to help rebrand ourselves because, we're both older and social media is something that still, I have issues with my phone sometimes trying to
oh, me too.
download and stuff like that. So we've got somebody who's going to be doing some work to help get us on Instagram and whatever else they have out there, so that they can reach us easily and more effectively and efficiently. So yeah, right now, just email me at Thomas at floydfamilycenter.org or tmclaurin57 at gmail.com. And of course, go to our website. And I'll be putting information on our website as we progress along with the documentary. And I will be calling you
Yes.
to talk more about what we're doing with the documentary.
Okay.
So, look for those things coming up in the near future.
Absolutely. And I just want to do this for you, Thomas, as well, because, I want to go ahead and just put that spelling out there for them as well. So it's M as in Mary, C, L as in Larry, AURIN. So I want to make sure that they're able to get it because they're like, well, how you spell that? Really, I want to make sure that they can find you. So,
Well, thank you for that because you know what? When I first moved here, a lot of people spelled my name McLaurin.
mm-hmm,
I don't
mm-hmm.
know if that's a Georgia thing or whatever, but it's McLaurin.
Yes, yes, yep.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
wanted to make sure they can get you. And I also want to leave them with this. And I asked you what was your key point? And I mean, you can reiterate, but I really wanted to make aware because it's all about what we were saying about understanding that there is problems, but there is solution. And what you're doing is your mission to help change the social climate, right? From
yeah, yeah.
hatred and volatile to harmony and fellowship. That's exactly what this platform is about. It's like, listen, there is what it is out there, right? We can call out all of the negative things that are happening, but what we're doing is banding together to make sure that we change that climate. Not so much as, like you said, be able to go back and, undo what was done, but from every day present that God gives us, we can make a difference and change the narrative, the perspective, and even the climate by bringing solutions and answers to us and the next generation. So I really do thank you, Thomas, so much for coming on board. And this is just the beginning of our conversations,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, you guys know, listen, you want to stay tuned for now good upcoming great music right here at DOD Radio. And you know what this station is? It's for your best self, your best life, because this is Best Radio. See you, and we are out.